Has anybody seen my umbrella? Last time I saw it, it was hanging out the back of something quite unpleasant.
Back Sexton Lovecraft on Kickstarter.
But first, let's have a cup of tea, shall we?
Hello and welcome to my review of If Only They Could Talk by James Herriot. This was published in 1970, but it is set in 1937. Herriot was the pen name for James Alf Wright, who was an actual vet and began practicing a couple of years after the book is set. This novel was combined with its sequel It Shouldn't Happen to a Vet and released in the US as All Creatures Great and Small. The story here can only be considered a plot in the loosest sense of the word. Herriot, a recent graduate, finds work as a veterinary assistant in Yorkshire with Siegfried. Siegfried and his brother Tristan squabble a little, and Herriot describes some of his experiences with the animals and other characters that make up their practice. In 1937, as the book mentions, engined vehicles were beginning to change the landscape of England. There was a declining need for the previously ubiquitous horse, and this in turn impacted the vet industry. There was much less demand for their services. Along with this, antibiotics and other new technologies were changing the way things were done. This does influence some of the stories that follow, but particularly Herriot's gratitude at having a job at all. The story is told mostly chronologically and in the first person, but in terms of plot, there's really not one beyond the general acceptance of Herriot into the community he serves. Instead, most chapters simply recount some sort of encounter an animal attended, and once in a while a lesson being learned. The only really recurring themes are the animosity between Siegfried and Tristan and the wealthy local Mrs. Pumphrey and her mistreatment of her dog Tricky Woo, and more importantly, the rewards Mrs. Pumphrey gives for Tricky's successful treatment. Generally, the tone is amiable, but some of the stories fall flat. In fact, after the first 3 or 4 of them, I was wondering if I'd enjoy this at all, which surprised me because though I do remember little to nothing of the series from the BBC, I do remember it being funny. The first story is pretty much the only part of the TV show that I do recall. Herriot attends the birth of a calf, a cold, wet and dirty slog of a job, and the whole time is treated to a running commentary of how the previous vet did a better job than him. And I remembered it being funny. But here I was colder than James. Unknown to me, there are apparently a great number of things that the BBC doesn't want budding vets to know about carving, but Herriot is less censorious. I could, he tells us, have delivered the calf by embryotomy, by passing a wire over the neck and sawing off the head. So many of these occasions ended with the floor strewn with heads, legs, heaps of intestines. There were thick textbooks devoted to the ways you could cut up a calf. Not the sort of cheerful, happy-go-lucky encounter I remembered then. And this is not a long book, but through the first 50 pages of this, there was precious little that was cheerful. Herriot runs afoul of Soames, who works for a local lord. Soames is obnoxious, arrogant and bad-tempered throughout Herriot's inspection of the lord's prize horse. He also rejects Herriot's diagnosis that the horse has an inoperable torsion, that Soames should have called him sooner, and that euthanasia is the only remaining option. Against Soames's protests, he puts the horse down. Still waiting for that funny, right? Well, when the post-mortem confirms everything Herriot said, Soames not only loses his job, but he gets a black eye for his troubles. Karma certainly, but funny? When Siegfried finds his brother has flunked out of college and launches into a lengthy and bad-tempered rant, Herriot is left writhing in embarrassment and aghast. I was starting to wonder if the BBC had adapted a different book. However, it is the arrival of the laid-back Tristan that changes the dynamic between the considerable effort he puts into not putting any effort into his work, or the other times he would be out with one of the young nurses from the local hospital, which he seemed to regard as an agency to provide him with female company. Tristan, as Herriot puts it, still managed to live a fairly full life. The back and forth the two have over late evening prank calls is a first true comedic moment and might have been developed further. After that, Tristan often finds himself the long-suffering butt of the difficult moments, unless of course it's a skill job that requires a vet's hand in an animal's nether regions. Then it is invariably Herriot's time to suffer, and the various bites and kicks he receives in the process are related with relish. When Mr. Dean, a widower, loses his dog and only companion, the dog's stoicism feels almost heroic, and though the prose is still rather matter-of-fact, the simple kindness and hospitality of Mr. Dean in his grief makes him more touching than Herriot's piles of body parts in Chapter 1. As an author, if not a vet, Herriot is hitting his stride now. Siegfried, ever keen to embrace a new method and undeterred by Herriot's story of a vet suffering a fractured skull after another newfangled technique was introduced, arrives at the scene of a cow that swallowed a length of wire. In new white coat and with a new table arrayed with surgical and hygiene equipment, he sets about removing the wire. A thorough dousing of intestinal contents later, and Siegfried's coat and dignity retreat in tatters. The drenching makes for an unpleasant car journey home, during which Siegfried declares the operation a complete success. This sort of story is far more successful than the various tales of random people getting physically hurt. You build up the dignity and expose it as a folly. It's genuinely funny, and the jokes always work better when the butt is one of the three vets, Siegfried, Tristan, or Herriot himself. Despite some difficult characters, Herriot mostly portrays the north of England with a vivid nostalgia. Though he's writing about a time 30 years later, it's hard to imagine the world of simple, hardy, but ever-generous northerners still existed. And it's even more so now, but you can't help but hope that it does, because Herriot writes with and of a love for the people and the place. It is, even among the stories that don't land, a genuinely engaging world. Even drenched in a cow's half-digested dinner, Siegfried is invited into lunch. Occasionally the farmers banter with the vets, and there is some genuine humour in those moments as well, especially in Herriot's experimental rubber suit and later when he arrives for a night call in his ostentatious pyjamas. For all the stories of bad people finding karma like the animals kicks back, the stories of genuine warmth and shared banter are the ones I could happily read all day. As I could the depictions of the country itself. The long days in the open gave me a tan that rivaled the farmers. Even mending a puncture was no penance on the high, unfenced roads, with the wheeling curlews for company and the wind bringing the scents of flowers and trees up from the valleys. And I could find other excuses to get out and sit on the crisp grass and look out over the airy roof of Yorkshire. It was like taking time out of life, time to get things in perspective and assess my progress. I hope that the north that Herriot depicts is still out there somewhere, and if they moved it south, I'd be happy to live there. It is this unabashed affection for the area and its people that make this book a consistently appealing read. In conclusion, Herriot's book, set in the pre-war years, depicts an idyllic countryside and the wide range of characters, not always human, who enliven it. There are a few too many stories of serious injury that are supposed to be funny, but I'm not sure how funny I'll ever find that sort of thing. The people sometimes occupy a chapter never to return, but some of the banter leaves a lasting impression. Our three main characters, Siegfried, Tristan and Herriot, all have something likeable and fun about them, yet despite that, when the person getting bitten, kicked or doused in something gross is one of the three, the story tends to work better than those where it is Mr. Random we'll never see or hear from again. Through it all, the affection for the country is the thread that holds everything together. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more.